Any questions from last time? Anyone wants to ask any questions? So there are many unfinished things which I will go into. Not about the unfinished, but if something was not clear, then I can take questions first and then proceed. Okay. So if not, then let me start. So let me not, I mean, so rather than start at the point I ended, let me do a recap, but not in the order we did. So here, so it's a recap, but I will say a bit more. Okay, so I'll take this chance to say a little more. Measure space.
Is
So
there
what
a
is?
TA class today?
Huh?
Evening.
Sorry.
Is there a TA class today evening? 7 o'clock or something.
Yeah, I believe there was something that is fixed, right? I mean, so Babubahan, I saw some posts. That's all. Presumably that is there at 6 or 7. I don't know when it is. But he has. I think you should ask him. You should discuss the general schedule and all that there. I suppose. I mean, because last time some of you had difficulties about it, right? Uh, yeah, I don't know. Lakshmi is not here, so she was one of the people who was saying that the schedule would not be good. But yeah, so you can discuss that.
Okay,
So I
okay.
have not yet put up the problem set. I also didn't figure out this assignment tab business. So okay, after class maybe I will ask you people a little help. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let me come to the topic. So measure space. So what is measure space? So I introduced these objects last time. So very important. So we have a set X. So this is any set. So let's be very clear. It's not empty set. So some arbitrary set, and then F is a collection of subsets. So it's a collection of subsets of X. Is called a sigma algebra. So some people write sigma algebra, sigma in the Greek. Sigma algebra if it is a non-empty collection. So I could say that by saying put the empty set inside that. Equivalently, I can say that F is a non-empty collection of subsets. For the reason that I also asked that it is closed under complements and countable unions. Okay, so complements, countable unions. So if the collection is non-empty, there is at least one set. By the way, this is the minimal way to state it. Then countable intersections are also there, as you can see, because intersections can be written as complement of the union of the complements. Therefore, one can from this one gets countable intersections also are there, etc. So pretty much all the set operations you do will be fine as long as you apply it to countably many of the sets inside F. Then you don't get out of F. That's the idea. Okay, so this is what a sigma algebra is. So why this strange definition? The only thing, well, I will not try to motivate too much. It is just that the most natural operations you do, you should not get out of the collection. Except that the countability is there. I mean, that is somehow a bit unnatural, but it is a stronger requirement. You could have asked that empty set should be there, it should be closed under complement, and it should be used closed under finite unions. We will later come to such an object that is called just an algebra. The sigma always indicates countability. So, and that is a stronger requirement that even countable unions have to be there. That is the stronger requirement. Okay. So this is what a sigma algebra is, and then a function mu from f to 0 infinity. It's always some non-negative function, but it could take the value plus infinity also. Is said to be a measure if you take any countable collection of pairwise disjoint sets. So this means An are in F and An intersection Am is empty if n is not equal to m. Okay, so this should be equal to the sum of the measures. Okay, so this is what a measure is. So two important definitions are here. These are, I mean, this will talk about them all the time. This whole subject is in terms of these objects. So sigma algebra and measure. Okay, so I said this last time, but now I have recapped the definition. So let's go over some examples. What are examples of such things? So this X, if I just have a set with a sigma algebra, it is called a measurable space. So if I have a triple X, F, and mu, it is called a measure space. So there are various things one does. In the beginning, you just the measurable space is something that is ready for a measure to be thrown on it. So that is what a measurable space is. So measure space is what we will work with. Later in more advanced stages, we will see that many a time it happens that we consider the same X and F and many different measures on it. That also can happen. Or in probability, it is a very common thing to have many different sigma algebras at the same time. You consider that also. So there is a meaning to that. We won't need that. At the moment, you just think of it as, so what do we think of it as? F is, measure is like length, area, volume, whatever it is. Measure is the more general notion. It is supposed to satisfy the strong, not just finite additivity, but countable additivity. Okay, that property we ask for. So that is a bit strong and not clear, not a priori motivated, but you just take it that this is what a measure is supposed to be. Now, the sigma algebra is the collection of subsets to which we will restrict, because that was sort of what I was saying, that if you consider all subsets, then you may not get some good notions of length and so on. So let's anyway forget those examples, come to some simple examples, trivial examples even. So what are some trivial examples? Yeah, any question?
So given a measurable space, will there always exist a measure which can satisfy the property?
Okay, so yeah, I think it's not difficult. I mean, so for example, there are trivial examples. Yeah. So whether an interesting one is there, just asking is there some measure is not particularly helpful. Yeah. If you ask what you are asking, there will be. You will see in a few moments. Okay. When I give examples, you will see that there are such things. But we will not just ask for any measure. We will ask for measure with some further requirements based on the situation we are in. And then it becomes a serious question whether there exists anything that satisfies that. Okay, so let's start with trivial examples. So X is any set. So any set. So always non-empty. Okay. So there are two sigma algebras which are very easy. So if I take F to be, see, ideally I would take it to be the power set. Why not? I mean, all subsets. So this is the collection of all subsets. Collection of all subsets of. So it is a sigma algebra. Right? I mean, you can take empty set is there. Complements, it's closed under complement, because if A is a subset, A complement is a subset. If ANs are subsets, union AN. So not even necessary that this, not even uncountable unions are fine. So this is a sigma algebra. This is one example. So let's call it, let's give it some name. So maybe we call it F, I don't know what to call it. So let me just call it F naught. F naught is maybe misleading. So what should I call? Okay, let's call it F1. So F naught, let's go to the other end where we take very few subsets. So I have to take the empty set, no choice. And if I take the empty set, I have to take its complement, which is the whole set. Certainly those two have to be there, but I can just keep those two subsets. Okay, so this is also a sigma algebra. So this is a collection of only two. Here you had all the subsets. So for example, so it could be depending if X is finite, say if X has n elements, then F1 has 2 to the n different elements. There are that many subsets. But if X is infinite, F1 will be some larger infinity. That is also there. But F0 is the tiniest possible sigma algebra because any sigma algebra has to contain empty set and hence also the whole set. And I'm saying this is itself a sigma algebra. Why? Well, you take any set here, the complement is there. Its empty set complement is X, X complement is empty set. So it's closed under complements. Is it closed under countable union? Suppose I take countably many ANs inside all of them in F0. So either all of them are equal to empty set, in which case the union is also empty set, so that is there. Or at least one of them is not empty set, in which case, say, let's say A7 is X. Then the union is also X, irrespective of what the rest of them are. That's also there. So this is the largest possible sigma algebra. This is the smallest possible sigma algebra. Okay, so these are two trivial sigma algebras. Now, what else is there? So let's give some other not so interesting example. So let's call it F2. So here is a collection of, so you take the collection of all A such that okay, let me give A is finite. So suppose I take this to be the collection of sets. So I take all finite subsets X you think of as real numbers, suppose. So if I consider all finite subsets, will that be a sigma algebra?
No.
No. What is the problem?
It doesn't have, it may not have X itself, for example.
Right. It does not have, it is only considering finite sets. So X also need not be there. So
countable unions would also not work, right?
Right. So let's throw in complements. So A is finite, or if you take complements of finite sets, you get sets whose complement is finite. Okay, is this a sigma algebra? So I take all sets which are either finite or their complement is finite. Well, so it is closed under, it contains empty set because empty set is considered to be countable. And if any set is here, either it is finite, in which case its complement has the cofinite property, meaning its complement is finite. So the other way. So it is closed under this one. But countable unions are a problem because if you take, if let's say you take singleton, so X is real numbers, and let's say you take the singleton 1, singleton 2, singleton 3, and so on. The countable union will be all integers, which is not finite. Its complement is also not finite. So the countable operations requires you to make this. So this won't be, but if I change it to A is countable. So either A is countable or A complement is countable. So this is also a sigma algebra. Why? So you take all sets, so either they are countable or their complement is countable. Sometimes it's called co-countable. So if what happens is it closed under complementation, an empty set is there. Complementation is also clear, right? If A is of the countable type, A complement is of the co-countable type and vice versa. But what if I take countably many sets AN in this F2? Will the countable union be there? Okay, so there are two possibilities. One is that each AN is here. So either one possibility is all the ANs are countable themselves. Okay, in which case the union AN is also countable, right? Countable union of countable sets is countable. So if all the ANs are countable, the union AN is countable, so it is in F2. But if that is not the case, at least one AN is such that its complement is countable. That means AN is just the complement of a countable set. So then if you take union AN, its complement is even smaller. So that's also countable. So these are some sigma algebras that we have. Okay. So this, of course, the third one is same as F1 if X is countable. If you start with a countable set, then all subsets are countable and co-countable. So this will be just collection of all subsets. But in uncountable sets, if X is uncountable, then this is different. Okay, none of these are interesting sigma algebras. They are all trivial examples. Okay. So these are the sigma. These are some sigma algebras, but these are not the interesting sigma algebras. Okay. So, but let's give some measures on this anyway. So, well, so let me give a measure which is a measure on F1 itself. Then it will be a measure on the others also. So let's so fix some A in X, fix a point A in X, and define. So this is a function which is like this. You take any subset, the value you will give it is 1 if that set contains the point that I have fixed and 0 otherwise. Okay. So this is for any set we give it the value 1 if it contains the particular element I have chosen. So for example, if X is real line and A is 0, so you are giving 1 to all sets which contain 0 and 0 to all subsets which do not contain 0. Okay, so I claim this is a measure. So 2 to the X is same as F1. Delta A is a measure on F1. Why? Well, it is quite easy. So the reason is, so you look at if ANs in F, so they are in F1 means they are just subsets of X, are pairwise disjoint, then either there are two possibilities. One possibility is none of them contains A. None of them contains A, in which case union AN also does not contain the element A, right? And this implies that delta A of AN is 0. And this implies that delta A of union AN is 0. But that is the same as sum over n delta not AN. Okay, so sorry, I should have written delta sub A, not delta not, delta sub A. Delta sub A. So if all the ANs are, if none of the ANs contains the point A, then basically we are saying 0 is the sum of countably many zeros. That is possible. Or since ANs are pairwise disjoint, there exists a unique N that contains A. Two different N's cannot be there which contain A because ANs are pairwise disjoint. So what this implies is that there is exactly one N for which AN belongs to A, and then the union also, of course, the union AN also contains that point A. So now what we know is that delta naught of AN is 1 for the special N, zero otherwise, but delta 0 of union NAN in this case is 1 because it contains A. So you see that if you sum this, you get 1. So this is an example of a measure on F1. Is this example clear? See, what it is that you are putting all the mass, so to speak, at a one point, and then you are making up this. So more generally, if you want, I can give a more general example. So once it is a measure on F1, so delta naught is a measure on F1. So can restrict it to measures on F2, F0 respectively. So when I write this bar, it means that you just restrict. So delta naught is defined for all subsets. Let's not worry about, let's only consider subsets F2. So I'm giving delta naught of A, I just define like this. So then I get a measure on F2 or on F0 for that matter. See, on F0 there is only one measure. From the properties of measure, you see that empty set should get the mass 0 because you are adding so many mu of empty sets and getting mu of empty set. So you take two elements, mu of a empty set union empty set is mu of empty set plus mu of empty set. So that tells that empty set should get measure 0. And the whole set can get any measure. Once you do that, that's it. If not, there is not much you can do. But F2, you can have other measures. So, but first, before going to another measure, let me give a generalization. So, more generally, let A1, A2 be points of X. So, countably many, countable collection of points in X, and let P1, P2 be non-negative numbers. Let's say strictly positive numbers. Then define mu of any set as sum of Pi over all I such that AI belongs to A. Okay, so I'm taking, so this is how you do discrete probability. So you think of these A1, A2, etc. as point mass locations. I want to put a probability or a mass of P1 at A1, P2 at A2. I'm not saying these have to sum up to 1 or anything. They are just positive numbers. So there is a mass of P1 at A1, mass of P2 at A2, and so on. And if I want to calculate the measure of any set, I will sum the values of Pi for all those AIs which belong to my set. So this is also a measure. It's a measure on 2 to the x, which is F1. Okay, because it's defined for all sets and you can check the countable additivity. It's not hard. It's just what does countable additivity here mean? Okay, so I take many disjoint sets, say A1. Sorry, 1 second. So suppose I have some sets A1, A2, etc. So what are mu of those things? Then I'm taking sum over A in A1 of sum over I such that AI belongs to A1 of Pi. And then sum over I such that AI belongs to A2 of Pi. And so on. Now A1, A2, etc. are disjoint. So there is no common element in this. So if I add these things, then I get the same as taking the union and adding Pi for all the sets, all the elements. Except there is a rearrangement involved, which since the numbers are non-negative, we can do. Okay, so is this okay? I mean, so this is so discrete measures. These are discrete measures. Basically, there is a countable set. Even though X is an arbitrary set, there is a countable set on which we put the weights. And then for any set, we get the weight by adding the measure by adding the weights inside that set. That's all. So this is a measure. So this I will leave as check. Okay. Okay, any questions? So now you see these are measures. So one of you asked the question, I did not see who, whether
I have one query.
Sorry? Is there a question?
I have one query.
But let me just
yeah,
finish
yeah.
the point. 1 second. Let me just finish
Okay,
because
yeah,
this was a
sure.
question that was asked. Someone asked the question, will there, if I give X and F, will there always be a measure? So here is a measure. Delta, I take a point at X and put the delta mass at that point. This is called the Dirac measure at A or delta mass at A. Okay. So that is always there. So you always have some measure, and more generally you have these discrete measures. So let me just give the names because they are used. So this is this delta naught. Delta A is called the Dirac delta measure. RT. It basically is the special case here where I have 1 point and I put a mass of 1 there. So these are discrete measures. When we say discrete measure, this is what we mean. There is a countable set on which there are masses, and every measure of any set is the sum of the weights occurring inside that. Okay. Okay. So question.
Yes, sir. Like here, probabilities Pi are already assigned to each and every point AI. That is assumed.
Yeah, I mean that's what I meant. P1, P2, etc. So A1, A2. For A1, I could call it P sub A1, P sub A2 if you want. I call it P1, P2. That's all. So there is some
Okay,
countable collection in X, and for at all those points, I assign some numbers, non-negative, positive numbers. Let's say.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sir?
Yes.
So in probability, we assume that the sum should be 1.
Yeah.
In these cases, is there any other condition on P? Like here, P is greater than 0, but do we have any conditions on the total P?
No. You can even put plus infinity. If some of the PIs could also be plus infinity actually, if you want.
Okay, so no
restriction. We want the measure is always something that it gives non-negative weights, so it will have to be non-negative. So, but they can be also even infinity. Yeah.
Sir, in that regard, if non-negativity is what we are aiming for, why the strict inequality, or is that just a preference?
Now, well, in this particular case, I said the strict inequality because suppose P1 was 0. Then in this set, I don't even have to consider that, right? I could remove all those that which have
that technically does correspond to a impossible event, right?
No, well, let's not interpret it. So let's suppose P1 is 0. Then all I'm saying is that in this specification, I could, let's say P1 is 0, all the others are positive strictly. Then I can just drop A1 and P1 here. They are not giving me anything actually. It's only a subset of X, right? Countable subset. I'll start with A2, A3 and P2, P3. It will give me exactly the same numbers because P1 is 0. Okay. So that is all.
Right.
Yeah. So there is nothing more to it. Yeah. So if you like, you write greater than equal to, no loss. No problem with that.
Sir? Do these particular measures also, like on account of the previous discussions, satisfy, say, uncountable additivity or what?
Sorry, satisfy uncountable?
Additivity, like this whole thing.
No, uncountable additivity is not, well, actually what is uncountable sum itself is not clear.
Right.
What is the meaning of uncountable sum? Okay, so so don't worry about that. These are countably additive.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so there is one more measure I can mention on F2. There is a measure on F2 which is not like this. Okay, so suppose X is real 9 and F2 is all sets which are either countable or their complement is countable. Now what I define is I define the measure of any countable set to be 0, measure of any co-countable set to be 1. That is actually a measure. I will leave it as exercise. Maybe it is there even in the problem set. So on F2 there is a measure mu of A is 0 for all countable A and mu of A is 1 for all co-countable sets. So that's also a measure. But all these are trivial. These are not the interesting sigma algebras. Okay, so true self-respecting sigma algebras will never reveal themselves like this. Okay, what are the real interesting sigma algebras actually? Okay, so interesting sigma algebras. Are never explicit. That is one of the important and that is one of the challenges in the whole subject, that this sigma algebra will not be explicit. What do we mean by that? So instead they will be specified by some requirements, that's all. like what requirement? Let me say this. So here is the notion of generated sigma algebra. Most sigma algebras that we are interested in will be of this form. Okay, so X is a set, always I mean non-empty, and let's say S is a collection of subsets. It's not in itself a sigma algebra. Okay, so just an arbitrary collection of sets. Okay. So then let it is denoted by this sigma of S be defined as the intersection of all F. Okay, where F is a sigma algebra on X and it contains my collection. Okay, see what I want is what is this generated sigma algebra? I don't know what the sigma algebra will be. That's usually the case. But I will say that, okay, certainly I want these sets to be in my sigma algebra, but those sets themselves may not form a sigma algebra. For example, in the real line, I may want all intervals to be in my sigma algebra, but the intervals themselves will not form a sigma algebra. Okay, just taking all intervals that is not closed under complements, for example, that's not a sigma algebra. So, but my requirement is I certainly want intervals. So what do? What I do is the following. S is here my collection of all intervals maybe. So what I say is that you could look at all sigma algebras which contain intervals. Okay. So is there any such, first of all? Is there any sigma algebra which contains all intervals? So there is one certainly, namely the power set itself. The power set is a sigma algebra. So there is at least one. So note that here this is a non-empty intersection. As is one of them. So if I take the power set, that certainly contains my collection S, right? And it's a sigma algebra. So that is at least there. So this one should be careful when you write intersections unions. If it's empty, intersection empty union, what do you mean? Okay, empty intersection may be problematic, but this is a non-empty intersection. So that problem is not there. So there is at least one sigma algebra, but I take all sigma algebras which contain my collection and I take the intersection. Claim is this is a sigma algebra. So, and it is called the sigma algebra generated by X. It's an unfortunate way of saying it, but for reasons I will explain. It's the sigma algebra generated by S. Okay, or we can also say the smallest sigma algebra containing S. So I have some collection which I certainly want there to be in the sigma algebra, and I take the smallest sigma algebra which contains all that. And does such a smallest sigma algebra exist? Yes, it will be defined like this. Okay. So this is a well-defined thing since the intersection is a non-empty intersection. So it is well-defined. But why is that a sigma algebra? It is very easy to see. You don't have to even worry about anything. See, sigma algebra is defined by closure properties. What does it say? Empty set should be there. And if some set is there, its complement should be there. If some countably many sets are there, their union has to be there. So these closure properties go well under intersection, right? So for example, empty set belongs to each of these Fs. So it will belong to the intersection. Now, suppose A is a set in sigma of S. That means A belongs to each one of these Fs. So A complement belongs to each one of these Fs. Therefore, A complement belongs to the intersection, namely sigma of S itself. So sigma S is also closed under complements. If ANs belong to sigma S, countably many of them, then all those ANs belong to, you take any F here, all the ANs will belong there. Therefore, their intersection or union will belong to that F. And that's true for every F, therefore union AN belongs here. So this is a very easy statement, okay? Is that clear or should I explain more? All I'm saying is you just apply definition, it is obvious. So we have sigma algebra is defined by closure properties. So if two collections, if I have two sigma algebras and intersect them, I get a sigma algebra. Okay, so because if A is there, then A is in both of them. So A complement is in both of them. So A complement is in the intersection and so on. So that is what I'm saying. So here, maybe if the point is not clear, so you think of this as an exercise. So show that an arbitrary intersection, not just two, of sigma algebras is a sigma algebra. Of course, there are sigma algebras on X, on one set. X is fixed. So you consider many different sigma algebras, countably many, uncountably many, it doesn't matter. Then that intersection is also a sigma algebra. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. So here I have a collection of sigma algebras and I'm taking their intersection. That is called the small, that's the smallest. In fact, you see, any sigma algebra that contains this collection S will be one of these. Therefore, this is the smallest, in fact, the sigma algebra. In other words, if any F contains, any sigma algebra contains the collection S, that it contains the entire sigma of S. So that's the smallest sigma algebra that contains the collection S. Is this clear? What I said, is there anything unclear about it? This is very important, very, very important. Almost all sigma algebras we will see will be defined like this, as being generated by some collection of sets, which we wish to be in the sigma algebra. So, one example, a prime example. Prime example. So X is X. Let's say XD is a metric space. Okay. So let the sigma algebra let S be the collection of all. Now I write all that. I don't need to write the symbol S. So let me just say the sigma algebra generated by the collection of all open sets is called Boyle sigma algebra of X. We write it as Bx. Okay. So the smallest sigma algebra which contains all open sets is called the Boyle sigma algebra and it is denoted Bx. So that is the thing. But one thing one should be very, very cautious about this thing, that this definition of generated sigma algebra is given like this. There is no other definition. Okay, so let us give an analogy with something else, because this is a mistake that, okay, every time I have taught probability theory course or measure theory course, I have said this. First time I taught it, I said that this is a mistake you are likely to make. And I said it, but people still made the mistake. So next time I said that this is a mistake that I said that people will make, but they still made. And the second year also they made. So inductively, now I have maybe 10 years of things. So this is a mistake that I have said every time that people will make, but they will still make. So this is a point that there is no, okay, what is the, so to explain what is the mistake people make, let me explain. So an analogy. So let's take V is a vector space. And S is a collection of vectors here. Okay. So we have the notion of span of S. Everyone knows it, right? So there are, what is span of S?
All the vectors that can be written as a linear combination of things in S.
Okay, all things that can be written as linear combinations of so vector space, let's say over R, just to be very specific. Alpha 1, all finite linear combinations like this, alpha n Vn, where Vi are coming from my collection S and alpha is are scalars. So this is this is one definition. Actually, one could have said that the definition we could have said it is the intersection of all W. Okay, W is contains S and is a subspace. So that is, this is the smallest subspace containing S. Okay, is that clear? Okay, first let's take that as the definition. Okay, span of S, let's take the definition to be the smallest subspace containing S, which makes sense. What do I mean by that? It means the intersection of all subspaces which contain S. And what we need to check is that that intersection of subspaces is a subspace. That is again because subspace is defined by closure property. So intersection, arbitrary intersection of subspaces is a subspace. So this intersection itself is a subspace which I call span S. But then you also figure out that, hello, I can write it in another way. I can write it as all finite linear combinations of elements coming from S. How do I check this is the same as that? Well, it is clear that any subspace that contains S will have to contain all the linear combinations. So span will have to contain all this. On the other hand, this collection itself is a subspace because you can take the sum of two of them, etc. So this is the smallest subspace that contains S. So there is this external definition, external description, let's call it. I just call it external description and internal description. Okay, so external description and internal description. So here there is external as well as internal description and they match. Okay, so the external description is it's the smallest subspace. Here it is the internal description like this. Now in sigma algebras there is no internal description. Okay, only there is an external description. I just said this. This is the mistake again and again people make, and it is partly because of the word using generated. Generated always seems like it means that you can now take things in S and generate elements of this sigma S. But nobody has said here, and it is not true that you can express an element in sigma S in terms of elements in S. It is not true that I can do countable. I can take a countably many sets in S, take the union, then do some intersections, do some complement. I can get this. No, elements in sigma S do not have a representation in terms of elements of S. So this is very important because time and again people will write, oh, Boyle set, okay, in real line open intervals are there. Boyle set is a countable union of open intervals and all such things. Complete nonsense. You do not know what is in the sigma algebra. Okay, so it is extremely large. You have no internal description like this. Okay, so that is how it is. So this is something you should keep in mind. This is the only definition you can use. Whenever you have to prove something about Boyle sigma algebra, you have to go back to, I mean, if you have to go back to definition, this is the definition. It's just the smallest sigma algebra that contains all open sets. Okay. So that is something that you should really internalize. And much of the difficulties will also come because of that. So you cannot use a description like this. So let me even first. Go ahead.
Sir, quick question. With open sets, can you generate singletons?
Mm-hmm.
So does V of X contain singletons?
Sure, because any single, I mean, for me, intervals were all okay because it's the union, it's the intersection, right? So, I mean, Boyle sigma algebra is defined like this, but it can be given many other descriptions, but all of them will be that it's generated by blah, 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 and so on. So, but okay, you are just asking about singletons. Yeah. So, well, let's take R. If you are in a metric space, it is anyway true. In a metric space, there is no problem. You take a singleton. A singleton. Oops, what happened? 1 second. Sorry. A singleton is just the intersection of open balls of radius 1 over n around the point. So these are in your sigma algebra for sure, because open balls should be there in the thing, and then the countable intersection of them. That's important. Don't write R positive intersection B of AR. That is true, but that's an uncountable thing. You have to express as countable operation. Then it is true. So this singleton belongs to that. Yes. So closed sets also belong to the Boyle sigma algebra because they are complements of this. Countable intersections of open sets also belong, even though they are not open or anything. So those are called Z delta sets. So they also belong. So lots of sets belong. But you cannot, there is no recipe to say these are all the things that belong. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So let me even give an example. Go ahead. Question?
Yeah, actually, singletons are closed sets. So it, I mean, they are complement of open set. So it is.
You could just
I mean,
say,
you don't even need that description to say that singletons will inside
no, I
the
agree.
world.
I agree. There are many ways to do it. I mean, yeah. So to say singleton is there, I just first gave this description in terms of, because this I was able to express actually, but in general you may not be able to do that. So for example, if you take 0, 1 and K is the Cantor set, is it a Boyle set? Because what is it? K is the intersection of Kn. And this is a countable intersection. Kn is a finite union of closed intervals. So each closed interval is the complement of an open set. So it is there in Boyle sigma algebra. A finite union of closed intervals will therefore be in the Boyle sigma algebra. So Kn is there, and countable intersection of these sets will be there. So K is a Boyle set. So elements of Bx are called Boyle sets, by the way. They are called Boyle sets. Okay. Okay. So let's yeah, maybe I will come to the other point that I wanted to say maybe later. So okay, no, maybe I will tell this. So to just make this point, drive home this point, that the generated sigma algebra has an external description, not an internal description. Okay, so let me tell this. So here is a question. So X is a set and F is a sigma algebra generated by some class of sets. Okay, so where S is a collection. Okay, so this is a sigma algebra generated by S. Is this all the notations are clear? I start with a set X, I take some collection S contained in it, and I take the sigma algebra generated by that. Now, suppose mu and nu are two measures on F. We will say on F, really it means on XF. Okay, so two measures on F. Suppose such that they agree for all sets in S. So then is it true that they agree on the sigma algebra? Okay, so here is a question. I'm just so this is a question we'll come back to later. So I have a sigma algebra generated by some collection of sets, and I have two measures on the sigma algebra. Okay, so they are countably additive on this sigma algebra, and they agree on the collection that was generating. They are equal. So does that mean the two measures are equal or not? What is the analogous question in vector spaces? I have a linear function. I have two linear functionals. So the analogous question here would be if the analogous question here, I'm just writing L1, L2 are two linear functionals and L1 equal to L2 on the generating set. Does that imply that L1 equal to L2 on the whole space? What's the answer here? Is it true that if two linear functionals agree on S, sorry, not on V, on span S. Sorry. Not on V, but on span S.
It should be yes.
Yes.
It's clear from this definition, right? L1 and L2, if I apply L1 to this, I get alpha 1 L1 of V1 plus alpha 2 L1 of V2 plus alpha n L1 of Vn. But L1 of V1 is same as L2 of V1. So I can replace all the L1 V1, L1 V2, etc. by L2 V1, L2 V2, L2 Vn. And then I get just L2 of this one. So they agree on span S. But here the corresponding thing is false. Here you are using the internal description and got it. But surprising though it may seem, even though S generates F and the two measures are equal on S, it is not true that they are equal. So the example is very trivial. You can make up many examples. So you can take the very trivial example. So let's take X is, for example, 1, 2, and 3, a 3-element set. Okay. And I take S to be the collection 1, 2 and 2, 3. What is F then? What is the sigma algebra generated by this? So this collection, so I want a sigma algebra which contains this 1, 2 and 2, 3. These two sets have to be there. I'm not asking for more. But what does that mean? Well, the complements will be there and all that, right? So the complement of 1, 2 will mean that the singleton 3 will be there, right? And complement 2, 3 will be the singleton 1. Now, if I take the union of these two, anyway, 1, 2 complement is 3, 2, 3 complement is 1. If I take the union of these two and take the complement, I get the singleton 2. Once I get this, I get all subsets by taking unions. So this is actually 2 to the x, all subsets. So the smallest sigma algebra that contains S contains everything, all the sets. Now, let me take two measures here. Mu is 2 times delta 2 and nu is delta 1 plus delta 3. Okay, what do I mean by that? So mu of A, so this means, so what do I mean by this? I am just using the notation that I used earlier. So mu of any set A, so mu of a set A 2 if A contains the singleton 2, 0 otherwise. Nu of the set A is 2 if A contains 1 and 3. That's what I mean by delta 1 plus delta 3. It's 1 if A contains 1, A does not contain 1, and A contains 3, or 1 if A contains 1 and A does not contain 3, and 0 if A does not contain 1, A does not contain 3. That's what it means. I put mass 1 at 1 and 1 at 3, and I add up those masses to get the mass of any set, like we do in probability, right? So this is what we do. So what is mu of this 1, 2? Mu of 1, 2 is 2, which is also mu of, sorry, what did I do here?
I think mu should just be delta 2.
It should just be delta. No, something is wrong. No, then it doesn't work, right?
It works.
Mu equal to just delta 2 will work, I guess.
If I just take delta 2, then they agree here. Okay. Yeah, okay. I want them to not agree on the bigger one. Yeah, you're right. So I just take mu to be delta 2, not that's right. So not 2 times delta 2, but just delta 2. So then the mass that the measure of the set 1, 2 according to mu will be 1, and according to nu will also be 1, because it contains 1 but not 3. And same for mu of 2, 3. That is also 1 and equal to nu of 2, 3. But clearly mu is not equal to nu. There are two different measures. It's clear, right? There are sets where they differ. For example, the singleton 2 has measure 1 here, 0 here. So you have agreement on the generating set but not on the full set. And because there is no internal description. Okay. So this is something I have spent a lot of time saying something elementary, but it's a point. If you don't realize it, then in fact, this is where the whole spirit of the subject is also there. Okay, I'll come back to that later. Now let me proceed. So what is the? Go ahead.
So mu equal to delta 2, we have proved earlier that okay, delta 2 is a measure, but delta 1 plus delta 3 is a measure.
Okay, I have that is also here, right? I mean, basically, I took the set A1, A2. A1 is 1, A2 is 3. P1 is 1, P2 is 1.
Okay, yeah, got it.
It's the same. That's what I mean. I didn't give that notation then. This measure can be, this measure is sometimes denoted. It is sometimes denoted. So sometimes it is written like that. Okay, not important. So.
Sir, could you go back to that notation once?
Which one? The one that I introduced just now?
Yeah.
Okay, as I said, it's not important, so don't worry about it. It is summation pi delta ai. So pi mass at the location ai. That's what it is saying.
Got it.
So if you apply that to a set A, what will you get? Pi times delta ai of this set A, which means it counts it as 0 or 1, depending on whether that is there. So you'll end up adding the pi's for those elements which do belong to A, capital A. That's what happens. Oops. Okay, so what happened? I thought I added a page. Okay. Okay, so let's now I want to go to the Lebesgue measure. I want to actually give the proof of the theorem that I stated last time. Now let me recap and state that theorem again. So now we will go back to what I was doing last time. We'll go back to Lebesgue measure. Okay, so let's just recall we are in the setting of the real line, and then lambda star is the Lebesgue outer measure, which is defined as the infimum of sum of in, sum of the lengths of intervals over all in are, I said LORC intervals, left open, right closed intervals, who such that union in contains A. This is true for this we define for all subsets of the real line. Okay, this is the Lebesgue outer measure. This is the Lebesgue outer measure, and we then defined the L. So L is the collection of all A all what I call Lebesgue measurable sets How was that defined? Lebesgue measurable sets. The definition was A is Lebesgue measurable if it satisfies the following conditions, that lambda star A intersection E plus lambda star A complement intersection E equal to lambda star E for all subsets E. Okay, so that is the this is called the Carathéodory cut condition. Carathéodory cut condition, though that is this set A cuts every set in a nice way that the outer measure of the two pieces will add up to give the outer measure of that set for any set. So that's the collection. So the set A is said to be, this is an individual set is said to be Lebesgue measurable if this happens for all E, and the collection of all Lebesgue measurable sets is denoted script L. Okay. So now let me state the theorem of Lebesgue, which I stated last time. I will state that in a different way with the language that we have introduced. So with the language we have introduced, the statement is L is a sigma algebra larger than the Borel sigma algebra, or at least as large as. At least as large as the Borel sigma algebra of the real line, and lambda star, so lambda equal to, let's call it lambda, is lambda star restricted to L is a measure on L satisfying lambda of any interval is the usual length of the interval. Okay, so this is the theorem that I stated last time, that if you do this definition of measurability, then what you get is a sigma algebra. So what are the things? So the point was lambda star is not good because it doesn't have finite additivity. So we have to give up and restrict to a class of sets. L is the script L is the class of subsets to which we are going to restrict. There are two things. One is that this script L is so lambda star when restricted to script L is good in the sense that it becomes a measure. Okay, that's what is said here. Lambda restricted to L, lambda star restricted to L is a measure. Okay, but that is not in itself satisfactory. L could be trivial. L could be that smallest sigma algebra we had, right? Empty set and full set. So what if L is the script L doesn't contain anything? No, script L is large. It in fact is larger than the Borel sigma algebra of R. That means it contains all open sets. So it contains intervals, all those things, closed sets, everything. So it is at least as large as that. And also lambda, when restricted to that, will satisfy that it is the usual notion of length on intervals. So it is an extension of the notion of length to this large class of sets. So we are saying again, L is something that we don't know what it is. Okay, so L is something again very intangible. Borel sigma algebra by definition is the sigma algebra, smallest sigma algebra containing open sets. This L is something even larger. We don't really know what is in L, what is not in L. It is rather all we have is assurance that it is a large collection. So it is larger than the Borel sigma algebra. So if you want, you can also restrict lambda to B itself. If you have a measure on a larger sigma algebra, you can just restrict it to smaller sigma algebra. It will still have the measure property, right? So that's all. Okay, so this is the statement that I had made last time. I want to give a proof of this. Okay, so any questions before? So the proof will basically be going through definitions, but it is neither entirely trivial nor super non-trivial. I think most of you will have difficulty if I just leave it as exercise. I think it's very difficult to work out this proof. because there are steps, many steps you have to do, and you have to do them in the right way. On the other hand, there is nothing very clever in them, but it takes. So whereas some 5 or 10 of you can sit together and hash out the proof in 2-3 days. That's also possible. So it's neither trivial nor non-trivial, but you have to run through the definitions, and that's what I will do. But before that, any questions? Okay, so let's prove it. But before proving anything, so we are going to have to prove L is a sigma algebra, right? That means you have to show that various things are in L. That means they have to satisfy the Carathéodory cut condition. So let me straight away observe one thing, that here, so remember, so let me show you from last lecture, that lambda star, the Lebesgue outer measure, there were some properties we had proved. Lambda star is non-negative. It has the monotonicity property. If A is subset of B, then lambda star is less than equal to lambda star B. And we had the countable subadditivity. Lambda star of any union, of countable union, is less than equal to sum of the lambda star of the individual sets. There's one more property we had proved before that, lambda star of an interval is actually the usual length. For closed intervals, lambda star of A is B minus A. Okay, so this much I am going to use. Okay, so you'll remember all this, right? So non-negativity, monotonicity, countable subadditivity, and the fact that on intervals it is the usual length. This much is what you need to know. So because of countable subadditivity, here this side, one side is trivial by countable subadditivity. Just let me write subadditivity. Hence we are using only finite subadditivity here, right? Because the union of A intersection E and A intersection E and A complement intersection E are disjoint, and the union is E. Therefore, the sum of the measures or outer measures is greater than equal to the sum of this. So what one needs to check? We only need to check less than equal to here. Okay, the sum of these is less than equal to, that's the only thing you need to check. The other way is always true by subadditivity. It's the less than equal to part that is really the condition here. That's the Carathéodory cut condition. Okay, so that we will remember throughout the proof. Don't ask me why I didn't prove the other way, because that's always true. Okay, so now let us prove. So it proceeds in steps. We have to do one by one.
So, sir,
Yes.
one question.
Huh.
So, what are the things we have to prove on L? So, L is anyway sigma algebra. So, that part is given, right? We don't need to prove.
It's not given. Where is it given? L is just a collection of sets satisfying certain properties.
Okay.
We don't know anything about this. It is not defined as a generated sigma algebra of something. No. It is just a collection of sets satisfying some strange, crazy looking property. That's all we have.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. So, right. So let me now go here. Right. So we'll proceed in steps. So suppose, so I'll do things like this. Suppose A, B. So first I will show, we have to show many things. We'll proceed in steps. First, let us show that this is, okay, simplest of all. If A is in L, implies A complement is in L. Okay, even simpler than that, I forgot, sorry. Empty set belongs to L is okay. Empty set belongs to L. Here, if I put empty set, if A is empty set, what do I get here? I get lambda star of E, and empty set intersection E is empty. So lambda star of empty set is 0. Lambda star of E equal to lambda star of E. So empty set belongs to L is clear. Now, if A belongs to L, A complement belongs to L, because this condition is symmetric in A and A complement. Okay, this has to hold for all E, but this condition is symmetric in A and A complement, so this is also trivial. These two, there is nothing to prove. So two things done actually about sigma algebra. Countable union is the issue, and it will take a few steps to get there. Okay, so first let us show that it is closed under intersection of two things. Why is that? Well, so you take any E. I will not write it. E whenever I read E is an arbitrary subset of R. Okay. So first we can decompose using the fact that A is measurable. I can write it as A will split it nicely. Okay, so basically A is here. A and B are nice sets. And E is some possibly crazy set. Okay, so what I am first doing is I am breaking lambda star E as lambda star of E intersected with A and E intersected with A complement. The part of E which is inside A and part of which is outside. Okay, so that is okay. Now I will further, but what I want to do is I want to show A intersection B is there, right? So I will break this. Now I apply that B is measurable to this set to write it as lambda star of E intersection A. For that set, I will intersect with B and intersect with B complement. Okay, so this is from A belongs to L. The first step is because A belongs to L. The second step, I have written this as the sum of two things. And then the second term remains. Okay, the second term remains. So what is this? So here I have something that I want. So this is E intersection of A intersection B. Okay, I have lambda star of that. Now I claim that if you take these two, this is greater than equal to lambda star of E intersected with A intersection B complement. What are the two sets here? E intersected with A intersection B complement. So here what is it? E, part of E which is in A but not in B. So that is this part. Okay, so let's write E into the first part is this. So that is here. This one. This is red. And then there is the blue part, E intersection A complement, which is the part of E which is outside of here. Okay, so what is the union of these two things? That is just exactly E intersection with the complement of A intersection B. A intersection B is here. So A intersection B is here. So the part of E which is not there is exactly this red part and the blue part together. So, but their union is this. Therefore, by subadditivity, their sum is greater than equal to this. So what this shows is lambda star E beats the sum of these two. So this greater less than equal to, which is what we needed to show. So this implies that A intersection B belongs to L. Okay. See, ultimately you have to go through these things yourself and check step by step. But I will just go over them. But if you don't get something, just sit and do it yourself. Is okay. It takes time. It may take time to follow. So this shows that this happens. So not only that, it in fact shows something. Okay, so now that we have intersections, I say that we already have finite unions also. Why is that? Well, simple. A union B is A complement intersection B complement complement. So A and B are in L. So A complement B complement are in L, and their intersection is in L, and then again their complement is in L. So this is okay. But something further, I mean, so we can say, in fact, so now I want to say that, in fact, lambda star. So I have to do both things actually. I have to show L is a sigma algebra and that lambda star is a measure countably additive on L. So the proof has to be intertwined. I mean, you can't do one without the other. So let's say how lambda star behaves with respect to disjoint union. Okay, so if AB L and A intersection B is empty implies lambda star of A union B. Now I can write disjoint union is the sum of the measures, outer measures. So this is a step towards countable additivity. Far from it yet. But if two things are in L, now I know that the union is also in L. Anyway, the outer measure is the sum of the outer measures. So why is this true? Well, it is already there. So because you take, in fact, I'll prove something more. So let E be any subset of R. You look at A union B is in L, right? So right. So E intersection. Yeah. So let's look at E intersection A union B. Okay. So E intersect. So A is here, B is here, and E is something like this. So what is the part of E intersection with A union B? It is the part of E that is in either A or B. So this can be written as, I can break it in, but A and B are disjoint. Sorry, I forgot that. A and B are disjoint. So there is no, this is not the picture. This is not the picture. So what I have is, I have A, B, and then I have some set E, which overlaps both possible. So what is A? The part of that which intersects the union of A and B, that is this as well as this, and they are disjoint. So that's what I want to write here. That's all. A intersection with A B is actually, okay, I will write it as E intersection. Okay, maybe I give it a name. Okay, so this just gets complicated if I write like this. So let's call this C. What I want to say is that C intersection A is E intersection A, right? So C intersected with A because the part in B is outside. Similarly, C intersection with A complement is E intersection B. Okay, so that is clear. So therefore, by the measurability of A, lambda star C is lambda star C intersection A plus lambda star C intersection A complement, which is lambda star of E intersection A plus lambda star of E intersection B. And this C is just lambda star of E intersection with A disjoint union B. Okay, so this is true for any E, in fact. Actually, so if you take E to be X gives lambda star of A disjoint union B equal to lambda star A plus lambda star B. Okay, so that's all. You are just applying definitions. That's all. So this is what I put is a bit more. A and B are in L, but E, when you intersect with E, E is arbitrary. That need not be in L at all, but still the additivity thing holds here. So this is not only this holds, this is what I wanted to prove here. But in fact, any arbitrary set E intersected with A union B, its outer measure is the sum of the outer measures of its intersection with the two sets. So that gives you the finite additivity of lambda star actually. Now what remains is okay, there are several things. So now comes the countable union. Countable union. So let us take if ANs belong to L implies union AN belongs to L. That's what I want to prove. And lambda star, okay, that will come to. So let's say L is closed under countable union. How do we show that? we have to again go back to definition. So let's use what we have already. So A1 union up to AN, let's call it Bn. Bn is the union of A1 up to AN. Okay. So then, and B is the countable union, right? So B is the countable union of all this. So then Bn's are increasing to B. I don't know if I used this notation before. What I mean is B1 contained in, B2 contained in. So this is an increasing collection and the union is B. Okay, so Bn increases to B means you have sets one contained in the next one, next one, next one, and the union is B. That's what is the notation here. This is just a notation for saying this. So I just introduced the notation. So what I'm supposed to show is that union AN is actually, that is B is measurable, right? The B is in L is what I want to show. I already know Bn is in L. Because why? ANs are in L and finite unions we know that are in L, right? So Bn is in L for all n. Therefore, what we know is that if I take any set E, lambda star of E will be lambda star of E intersected with Bn and lambda star of E intersected with Bn complement. This much is clear. Now, what's the relationship between Bn and B? Bn is contained in B, Bn complement contains B complement, right? So Bn complement is larger, Bn is the, okay. So this will be greater than equal to, I can write lambda star of E intersection Bn plus lambda star of E intersection B complement. Because Bn complement is anyway larger. So monotonicity tells you that this outer measure is larger than this. I have left this part as it is. Now what do I do? Yeah, what do I do? Okay, so maybe at first I assume they're disjoint actually. So okay, so let me assume that ANs are not only in L but and pairwise disjoint. Let's prove that. If ANs are pairwise disjoint, then all these are disjoint unions. So what I have here is that Bn is the disjoint union of A1 up to An. Okay. So what will be lambda star of E intersected with Bn? Just the finite additivity of lambda star that I showed just now shows that this is actually equal to lambda star of E intersection with AK. Right, so Bn is the disjoint union of A1, A2, An. So the lambda star of E intersection with that is the sum of lambda star of E intersection with each of them. So that is gives me lambda star E intersection AK. I wrote for 2, then you inductively prove it for more. It's trivial. So this you get. So this is true for all n. Implies I let n go to infinity. Left side does not depend on L. So you get this side is greater than equal to lambda star of E intersection B complement, which I write first, plus this sum is actually k becomes sum k equals 1 through infinity E intersection AK, because the finite sum becomes countable sum when you let n go to infinity. Okay, but by countable subadditivity, you know that this is greater than equal to lambda star of E intersection B. Therefore, you see that what have we proved? We have proved that lambda star of E is beats lambda star of E intersection B plus lambda star of E intersection B complement. And that's the Carathéodory condition, the non-trivial part of it. Lambda star is greater than or equal to the intersection with the set and the intersection with the complement. So that is what we have. So this implies that B belongs to L. And also it implies, if I take, it also implies that lambda star of B is, in fact, if I take E to be B itself, what do I get? I get, if lambda E to be B itself, then E intersection B complement will be empty. I get that this is in fact equal to, so I get the countable additivity also. So if I take here E equal to B, left side is lambda star of B, right side lambda star B intersection B complement is 0, and I get this infinite sum. B intersection AK is just AK, because B is just the union of AKs, right? So this is what we get. So what we have proved is that if ANs are in L and pairwise disjoint, then the union is there and also countable additivity holds. The only thing is, what if ANs are not disjoint? Is it still true that the union belongs to L? Well, it is easy to do that. So let B1 be A1, B2 be A2 intersection A1 complement. So you disjointify these things. A3 intersection A1, A2 complement intersection A1 complement, and so on. So in general, in Bn, you take only those things which come for the first time in An. Whichever appeared in one of the previous AIs, you don't count them. And so on. So then Bn are pairwise disjoint. First of all, Bn belongs to L for all n. Why? Because An belongs to L for all n, and complements will belong and intersections will belong. All these are finite intersections. So Bn's are themselves in L. Also, Bn are pairwise disjoint. And what else? And the union of Bn's is same as union of An's.
It's 5 o'clock.
Okay, so I will finish. So union of Bn's is same as union of An's. But then here, basically, I wanted to show this belongs to L, right? But this is the disjoint union. So this is in L by previous step. So by previous step, disjoint union of disjoint countable union belongs to L. So this belongs to L by previous step. Therefore, union An, hence belongs to L. That is the statement. So actually, we have proved that L is a sigma algebra. We have proved, what have we proved? That L is a sigma algebra, done, because complements and empty set was easy. Countable unions is now done. Lambda star restricted to L is a measure also we have proved, because we just showed countable additivity. If An's belong to L and are pairwise disjoint, then lambda star of this B is the union of An's, is the sum of the lambda star of the individual sets. So we have shown that it's a measure also. Now, what else have I shown? Have I shown that, okay, this also is already, this was done before. So the only thing remains is this one. Okay, it remains. So maybe we'll do it next time. So if this was fast, I mean, anyway, it is not very useful listening to this type of argument unless you check yourself. So please do that yourself. And next time what I will do is I will tell why it is not a trivial sigma algebra. what we will show is that it contains all intervals. Once it contains intervals, it will contain all Borel sets, in fact. So, okay, so I will stop here. Yeah, so the class is over. If there are any questions or comments, I'll be happy to answer.
Sir, could you please go to the last page?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Here.
Yes, I'll just
further down.
Last. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay.
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you
Could we directly prove measurable on Borel sets instead of proving on L and then showing L is a superset of Borel?
Yeah, it is a good question. Good question. So, I mean, so one is, okay, so there are several points that can be addressed based on this question. So L is some sigma algebra larger than Borel sigma algebra. Actually, Borel sigma algebra itself is so large, we would be happy to work with it. In fact, most times we'll just restrict to Borel sigma algebra. So first of all, how large is it? But of course, larger is better. In some sense, if we could do it on power set, we would have done it. So in some sense, larger is better here. Larger sigma algebra is better. But but since we are going to be happy with Borel sigma algebra, could we have done it without doing it to the sigma? Yes, actually it is kind of possible. Stein and Shekachi kind of take that approach. So I have not. I will actually also mention that sort of, but I will stick to this way of doing things. If you want to see that, you see Stein and Shekachi. What they do is that they don't care about the extra bit. It is possible to first do it on Borel sigma algebra and then extend to Lebesgue this L also. That's also possible. But what they do is some property that I showed of outer meshes. We will come to this. I will go to an abstract situation and do all this. So this property, this property 4, if A and B are disjoint, then the outer measure of the union is the sum of outer measures. So they show that from there you immediately get that you get a measure on Borel sigma algebra using this property. Okay, so if you take any, so in other words, one can prove an abstract theorem. Take any lambda star. Okay, satisfying properties 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, in fact, lambda star can be defined on the collection of subsets of some metric space X. Let's say X is some metric space, and you have defined for every subset of the metric space, you have given a number which you denote lambda star of A. And suppose it satisfies these 4 properties: non-negativity, monotonicity, countable subadditivity, and this metric property, what we call metric property. Then what you can show is that when restricted to Borel sigma algebra, it is a measure. Okay, so that is true. So it sort of can be done. So there are some situations where it is better to do on the larger one, namely the Lebesgue sigma algebra, but there are also situations where we don't need to worry. I will discuss this more later. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sir, can you explain the Borel set once more? It's still not clear.
What is a Borel set? Yeah, it will never be clear. So then you have already achieved the level of understanding. So because we don't know what are Borel sets, okay? So that is the point. So, well, okay, there is a limited level of understanding we'll achieve. So Borel set is defined as, oh, where am I? Okay, measure space here. It is just defined as so you take, so I have a metric space, like take real numbers with the usual metric. What I want is, forget metric also, take real numbers. All I want is that I want intervals to be there. And I want a sigma algebra So sigma algebra is good because if I want to measure lengths, and if I can measure the lengths of ANs, then I should be able to measure the length of union AN. That's how I say it. Okay, so let's say we want to define a sigma algebra on which define lengths on some sigma algebra of subsets of R. My requirement is it should at least contain intervals, otherwise I'm not interested. So then what is the, so then if that is all your requirement, you can take any sigma algebra which contains that. But if that is all your requirement, you can work with the smallest of them, the smallest sigma algebra that contains all intervals. That is same as Borel sigma algebra. Okay, you can think about why, but I will discuss maybe later. But so this in general in a metric space, we make the requirement that at least open sets are a special class of sets. I want them to be there in my collection. But I also want my collection to be closed under countable unions and complements and so on. So then it means you have to add a lot of sets. As I said, there is no internal description, so I cannot say what you have to add. But you have to add a lot of things. But abstractly, we know that there exists a smallest sigma algebra which contains all open sets. And that is called the Borel sigma algebra. If you give me a particular set, I may be able to check whether it is a Borel set or not. For example, Cantor set is in B, as I checked, because I was able to actually express it in terms of intervals. But it is the, if you cannot do that in general. So it can be way more complicated than that. Yeah, so that's what I can say. But you should know that all sorts of sets that you think of are there. I mean, compact sets, closed sets. I mean, you take countable intersections of open sets, countable unions of closed sets, all such things will be there. It's hard to give a set which is not in the Borel sigma algebra, and even harder to give a set that is not in the Lebesgue sigma algebra. It's also not entirely obvious that Borel sigma algebra is not equal to Lebesgue sigma algebra. Okay, so in other words, all I'm saying is that we should address this question, and we will sort of address maybe not all parts of it, but not, this is not in the positive side of things. But as I said last time, we should also know what doesn't work. So in the, let's say on the real line, we have the Borel sigma algebra, which is a good one. Then there is the Lebesgue sigma algebra, which I said is smaller, and that is contained in the power set. Now, the fact that these are not actually, Lebesgue sigma algebra is not everything. That also is not obvious. So that means there is some set which is not a Lebesgue measurable set. One has to show that. Similarly, to show that there is some Lebesgue measurable set which is not the Borel set, not a Borel set, that also needs an argument. We will address them later. So in that sense, it's kind of hard. I mean, so but all these examples are a bit non-trivial, which is good for us, which means that B and L are large collections, and they have most of the sets we care about.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sir?
Huh. Okay. So two people spoke, Rahul and Lakshmi. Rahul, maybe you go ahead.
Yeah, Rahul.
Yeah. So a couple of questions. The Borel for discrete sets will be 2 power x, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you take integers, if x is integers with the metric, which is distance between, you take any metric, you take distance. So singletons are open sets there. Right. So as long as singletons in integers are open sets, then all sorts of, anyway, z is already countable. Okay. So that will give you all subsets will be countable unions of singletons. So you will get the whole power set of integers. That's correct.
Sir, and the second question was, are they the same infinities, Borel and L with respect to 2 power r?
Good question. One way to distinguish between the two is that they are not actually. So the Borel sigma algebra, the cardinality is, so the Borel sigma algebra has same cardinality as real numbers. This is not obvious. I think it's not. So Lebesgue sigma algebra has same cardinality as 2 to the r. So that is one way to say that they are not actually same. So this we will see this, that Lebesgue sigma algebra has same cardinality as this is CZ. The Borel sigma algebra cardinality, I have to think. I mean, I don't know if I remember a proof also, but it is true. So that's your question, right?
Okay, I'll check it separately.
No, I have not proved anything, but it is true. One of the things about one of the nice things about Lebesgue sigma algebra is that if it contains, well, okay. So one of the ways to see, I'll just mention this. Why is this 2 to the r? So Cantor set is in B as well as in L. Cantor set is in B and hence also in L. Now Cantor set has outer measure 0. So one of the things you can check is any set with outer measure 0 is in L. Okay, actually it's direct from definition. The Carathéodory cut condition is here. If A has Lebesgue outer measure 0, then what happens? This left side is actually 0. This first one is 0. And this is a subset of E. So less than equal to will hold. Okay, so every set with outer measure 0 is in L. That is enough to say that every subset of Cantor set is in L. And Cantor set has the same cardinality as real numbers. Therefore, if subsets of Cantor sets has same cardinality as subsets of real numbers. So that is the proof of this. This one is, as I said, I don't remember.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, Lakshmi, you have a question?
Yes, a small query. So as phi is in Borel sigma algebra, so phi is also called as Borel set, right?
Sorry, say it again.
Like I think phi should be is in Borel sigma algebra. So like phi is also called Borel set.
Empty set. You mean empty set? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Empty set is in every sigma algebra.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All sets. Empty set is in every sigma algebra. Yeah. Any other questions?
You mentioned Borel algebras for metric spaces. This can be just generalized to any topology, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that everyone may not have a background of topology, so I just said metric space. You can take general topology also, no harm in it. But then some things, so for example, the statement that singletons belong to that need not be true, for example. Right? I mean, so you can have a non-Hausdorff space and other things. So, yeah. I mean, metric spaces are good enough for all our purposes. Okay. So maybe I stop recording.